My name is Octavio Sanders, and at 67 years old, I finally bought my dream home on the Massachusetts coastline after decades in construction. For 10 years, my son Thomas, his wife Amanda, and my grandchildren acted like I no longer existed. No calls, no visits, nothing. Then something incredible happened. The very day after I posted photos of my new oceanfront property, guess who showed up unannounced with suitcases in hand? If you want to hear how I reminded my ungrateful son and his family where they really stood in my life, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button. I spent my entire life with calloused hands and a strong back. Starting as a teenage laborer on construction sites, I worked my way up through the ranks until I finally opened my own contracting business at 32. Those early years were brutal, waking before sunrise and coming home long after dark. But I built Sanders Construction from nothing into one of the most respected firms in our county. During those struggling early years, I met Maria, the love of my life. She waitressed at the diner where I grabbed coffee every morning, always greeting me with that smile that could light up the darkest winter day. After 6 months of nervous small talk, I finally worked up the courage to ask her out. 2 years later, we were married in a small ceremony with just our closest friends and family. Maria brought balance to my life. While I was all rough edges and practicality, she added warmth and laughter to our home. 3 years into our marriage, Thomas was born. The moment they placed my son in my arms, I promised him I would give him everything I never had, growing up in poverty. As Thomas grew, I made sure to be present despite my busy schedule. I coached his little league team every spring, taking him to practices twice a week, even when I was bone-tired from work. Weekends were sacred family time. We would pack fishing gear and head out to Lake Champlain, where I taught him to bait a hook and wait patiently for the fish to bite. By the time he was 12, Thomas could identify every tool in my workshop and had learned the basics of carpentry, building his own birdhouses and small furniture pieces. Maria was the perfect mother, balancing my sometimes stern approach with her natural nurturing instinct. Our home was filled with laughter and love. Every night, we ate dinner together as a family, discussing our days and making plans for the future. Thomas was a bright kid who excelled in school, particularly in math and science. We saved every penny we could for his college fund, determined to give him opportunities beyond what either of us had. When Thomas turned 18 and headed off to university to study business, we couldn't have been prouder. Our boy was the first in either of our families to attend college. The future seemed limitless for him, and by extension, for us as his parents. But life has a way of testing even the strongest foundations. During Thomas's sophomore year, Maria started experiencing unusual fatigue and pain. At first, we dismissed it as overwork, but when she began losing weight rapidly, we knew something was seriously wrong. The diagnosis came like a wrecking ball to our lives. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lasted 4. I was completely devastated. Maria had been my compass, my heart, my home. Thomas returned from college for the funeral, shell-shocked and grief-stricken. We clung to each other during those dark days, united in our loss. After 2 weeks, he returned to school, and I threw myself into work, trying to outrun the pain that followed me like a shadow. Thomas changed after his mother died. He became more withdrawn, less willing to share his life with me. I understood grief takes different forms and gave him space. During his calls home, he started mentioning a girl named Amanda. From what I gathered, they met in an economics class and quickly became inseparable. I was happy he had found someone during such a difficult time. The summer after his junior year, Thomas brought Amanda home to meet me. She was objectively beautiful, with perfect blonde hair and a practiced smile. Something about her struck me as calculated, but I pushed those thoughts aside. If she made my son happy, that was all that mattered. I noticed how she constantly checked her phone during dinner and asked detailed questions about my business and property. Thomas seemed oblivious, gazing at her with love-struck eyes. After their graduation, Thomas announced they were engaged. The wedding was an elaborate affair, mostly planned by Amanda and her mother. I felt like an outsider at my own son's wedding, relegated to writing checks and showing up when told. Thomas seemed different around his new wife, constantly checking her reactions before speaking or making decisions. Still, I told myself every marriage requires adjustment. Within their first year of marriage, Amanda became pregnant. I was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a grandfather. When Jackson was born, holding that tiny baby brought back memories of Thomas as an infant. 3 years later, little Lily joined the family. I tried to be a present grandfather, offering to babysit and buying thoughtful gifts. But Amanda always had excuses for why it wasn't a good time for me to visit. The first clear sign of trouble came when I offered advice about Jackson's constant ear infections, suggesting the pediatrician who had treated Thomas so well. Amanda bristled, informing me coldly that they had excellent doctors and didn't need my outdated suggestions. Thomas said nothing, staring at his shoes. As time passed, I noticed a pattern. My invitations for Sunday dinners were accepted less and less frequently. Phone calls became shorter, with Thomas sounding distant and distracted. Amanda began screening my calls, telling me Thomas was busy and would call back, though he rarely did. Each missed birthday dinner or ignored holiday invitation cut like a knife, but I kept reaching out, believing family was worth the effort. 3 years into their marriage, Thomas called me out of the blue. His voice had an unfamiliar tension as he asked if we could meet for lunch. We sat at a quiet corner table in the local diner where his mother and I had our first date. Thomas looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy I had never seen in him before. After awkward small talk, he finally got to the point. They had found their dream home, a beautiful colonial in an upscale neighborhood with excellent schools for the kids. The problem was the down payment. Housing prices had skyrocketed, and they were 20% short of what they needed. The amount they needed was $50,000. My first instinct was immediate relief that this was all he was worried about. Of course, I would help my only son secure a good home for his family. I had been saving for years, living modestly despite my business success. This was exactly the kind of situation I had saved for. When I told him I would help, the relief on his face was palpable. We agreed on a simple repayment plan over 5 years, though in my heart, I considered it more gift than loan. I wrote the check that afternoon and helped them move in the following month. Seeing my grandchildren running through their new backyard, I felt a deep satisfaction. This was what family was about, helping each other through rough patches. For a few weeks, Thomas called regularly with updates on house projects and neighborhood news. Amanda even invited me over for dinner to show her appreciation. I brought expensive wine and played with my grandchildren until bedtime. It seemed like we had turned a corner in our relationship. Then the silence began. My calls went straight to voicemail. Invitations were declined with increasingly thin excuses. Weeks turned to months with barely a word. When I drove by their house hoping to catch them, the curtains were suspiciously drawn. At Christmas, I received a generic card with no personal note, just their printed names. 6 months after lending them the money, I stopped by, unannounced with gifts for the children. Amanda answered the door in workout clothes, clearly surprised to see me. Through the crack in the door, I could see Thomas in the living room. When he spotted me, his expression flickered between guilt and annoyance. Amanda stepped outside, partially closing the door behind her. She explained they were in the middle of something, and it wasn't a good time. As I turned to leave, I heard Thomas's voice through the window. What did he want now? Amanda's response chilled me to the bone. Nothing important. I told him we're busy. He needs to learn we have our own lives. Heartbroken, I returned home and stared at family photos for hours. What had I done to deserve such treatment from my only child? The boy I had taught to ride a bike and throw a baseball now spoke about me as if I were a nuisance rather than his father. When 3 months passed with no word, I finally called and insisted on speaking with Thomas. The conversation was brief and painful. I asked directly why they had been avoiding me. His voice turned cold as he accused me of being too controlling, of not respecting their boundaries, of treating them like children. When I reminded him of the substantial financial help I had provided, he said that was exactly the problem, that I held it over their heads. Nothing could have been further from the truth. I had never once mentioned the money since writing the check. I realized with growing horror that Amanda had been systematically poisoning my son against me, rewriting our history to cast me as the villain. My attempts to explain were met with further accusations. Thomas said I was trying to make him feel guilty, that I was manipulating him emotionally just like I always had. The conversation ended with his cold statement. "We need space, Dad. Please respect that." The click of the phone disconnecting echoed in my empty house. Despite the hurt, I continued sending birthday and Christmas gifts to my grandchildren. Most were never acknowledged. Occasionally, I would receive a stiff thank you note in Amanda's handwriting, clearly forced. I sent cards for every holiday, left voicemails on special occasions, and even emailed photos of Thomas's childhood in hopes of rekindling some connection. Once, about a year after the phone call, I ran into them at a local restaurant. My heart leapt at the chance encounter, but the moment quickly soured. Thomas nodded curtly while Amanda busied herself with the children. They declined my invitation to join tables, claiming they were just finishing up, though their untouched food suggested otherwise. 10 minutes later, they were gone, leaving me alone with a view of their empty table. That night, I pulled out the loan agreement Thomas had signed. Not a single payment had been made. The betrayal wasn't about the money, but what it represented. They had taken what they needed from me, then discarded me like an old tool that had served its purpose. The following years blurred together in a haze of rejection and heartache. Each season brought holidays spent alone. Each year marked the passing of milestone events I wasn't invited to witness. Through mutual friends, I learned that Jackson had started kindergarten. I drove by the school on his first day, watching from a distance as my grandson walked into the building holding his mother's hand, a moment I should have been part of. My 65th birthday came and went without a call from my son. I sat alone at my kitchen table with a store-bought cupcake and a single candle, wondering how my life had come to this. The business I had built was now run primarily by my trusted employees as I transitioned to semi-retirement, leaving me with too much time to dwell on my losses. The summer Jackson turned 7. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that he had joined a youth baseball league. Without telling Thomas, I attended a game, sitting far in the bleachers where they wouldn't notice me. My grandson had my build and Maria's coordination. Watching him hit a double, I felt both pride and a profound sadness that he didn't know his grandfather was cheering for him. After the game, I worked up the courage to approach. Thomas spotted me first, his face darkening. Before I could reach Jackson, Amanda intercepted me, steering the children toward the parking lot with a tight smile and promises of ice cream. Over her shoulder, she called that they were in a hurry, and perhaps another time would be better. That other time never came. With my 70th birthday approaching, I experienced chest pains that sent me to the emergency room. The doctors discovered a minor heart condition requiring medication but no surgery. Alone in the hospital room, I realized with crushing clarity that if something truly serious happened to me, my son might not even attend my funeral. I sent Thomas a brief email about my health scare, not to make him feel guilty, but because a son should know about his father's health. His response came 3 days later, 2 sentences wishing me a quick recovery and saying they were very busy with the children's activities. Not even a phone call. The isolation began affecting my physical health. I slept poorly, lost my appetite, and found little joy in activities I once loved. My doctor suggested therapy, concerned about signs of depression. The weekly sessions helped me understand that I had done nothing to deserve this treatment, but they couldn't fill the hole in my heart where my family should have been. During the 8th year of estrangement, I was shopping at the local grocery store when I literally bumped carts with Lily, now a beautiful 10-year-old girl with Maria's eyes. For a moment, her face showed innocent curiosity at this stranger, who seemed somehow familiar. Before I could speak, Amanda rounded the aisle, her face flashing panic then anger. She grabbed Lily's arm, whispering something in her ear. The child's expression changed to confusion, then vague fear as she was pulled away. I later overheard Amanda telling her that I was nobody important, just an old man who used to know their family. That night, I hit rock bottom. For the first time since Maria died, I drank myself into oblivion, polishing off half a bottle of whiskey while looking through old photo albums. The pictures chronicled a life that no longer existed, a family that had dissolved, leaving me alone with mere paper memories. I woke the next morning on the living room floor, surrounded by scattered photographs, my body aching and my soul in tatters. The next winter marked 10 years since I had had any meaningful contact with my son's family. In a final, desperate attempt to reconnect, I sent a heartfelt letter explaining how much I missed them and asking for just one chance to re-establish our relationship. I promised to respect whatever boundaries they set, just pleading for some small place in their lives. 2 weeks later, the letter was returned, unopened, stamped, "Return to sender." That single act of rejection felt more definitive than all the years of silence. They hadn't even cared enough to read my words. The humiliation was complete. I had begged for scraps of affection from my own child and been denied even that. Something broke inside me that day, but surprisingly, from that brokenness emerged a new clarity. I couldn't continue living in emotional limbo, waiting for a reconciliation that would never come. It was time to rebuild my life, with or without them. The returned letter became my turning point. That night, I gathered every family photo, memento, and reminder of Thomas and his family, and packed them carefully into boxes. I didn't destroy them. I simply removed them from my daily sight. The past would always be there in those boxes, but I needed to stop living in it. The next morning, I woke with purpose for the first time in years. I made a simple vow to myself. No more reaching out, no more self-pity, no more waiting by the phone. My life was my own responsibility, and it was time I started living it again. My first step was joining a local community center that offered activities for seniors. Initially, I felt awkward and out of place, having isolated myself for so long. During my first woodworking class, I sat alone, struggling to engage with others. That's when Frank Donovan, a retired firefighter with a booming laugh, pulled up a chair beside me. "You look like you could use a friend," he said simply. "First days are always the hardest." Something about his straightforward manner reminded me of myself before grief and rejection had dimmed my spirit. We bonded over our shared love of craftsmanship and terrible jokes. Frank became the first real friend I'd made in a decade. Over coffee after class, I found myself sharing pieces of my story. Frank listened without judgment, then offered perspective that cut through my fog of self-doubt. "Octavio," he said, "you can't control how others treat you, but you can control how much power you give their treatment over your life. Your son made his choice. Now, you need to make yours." Those words struck me with the force of revelation. I had been giving Thomas and Amanda complete power over my happiness for years. No more. I began filling my calendar with activities that once brought me joy. I returned to fishing, spending peaceful mornings on the lake watching the sunrise. I volunteered at a local construction training program for at-risk youth, teaching teenagers the trade that had given me a good life. Seeing their eyes light up when they successfully completed their first project reminded me of teaching Thomas, but without the painful associations. One of these teens, a quiet boy named Darren, reminded me particularly of myself at that age. Abandoned by his father and struggling to find direction, he soaked up every bit of knowledge I offered. When he asked if I could help him prepare for a construction job interview, I spent hours coaching him on what employers would be looking for. The day he got the job, his proud grin was worth more than gold. "You're the closest thing to a grandfather I've ever had," he told me. The words healed something deep inside. Through the volunteer program, I met other retirees who had found purpose in mentoring. We formed a tight-knit group, meeting weekly for dinners where we shared stories and supported each other. These people knew nothing of my past success or failures, They simply accepted me as I was now. In their company, I rediscovered how to laugh freely and speak openly. My physical health began improving alongside my mental state. I joined a senior swimming class at the local YMCA, gradually rebuilding strength and stamina. The chronic back pain that had plagued me for years diminished as I became more active. My doctor was amazed at the improvement in my blood pressure and overall health markers. "Whatever you're doing," he said during my checkup, "keep doing it." As my social circle expanded, I found myself invited to community events, dinner parties, and even a senior dance, where I surprised myself by remembering steps Maria had taught me decades ago. Dancing with Catherine, a kind widow from my book club, I felt a lightness I had thought was gone forever. We weren't romantically involved, but her friendship added a softness to my days that had been missing. 2 years into my new life, I received unexpected news. My older brother Anthony, with whom I'd had limited contact over the years, had passed away. To my shock, he had left me a substantial inheritance. Anthony had invested wisely in tech stocks during the 90s and never had children of his own. His will stated simply that he hoped the money would help me find happiness in my remaining years. The inheritance, combined with my own careful savings and the sale of my business, presented an opportunity I had never anticipated. For the first time, I could consider living anywhere, doing anything. After decades of practical decisions and deferred dreams, I allowed myself to contemplate what I truly wanted. The answer came during a weekend fishing trip with Frank to Cape Cod. Watching the sunrise over the Atlantic, feeling the salt spray on my face and hearing the rhythmic crash of waves, I felt a profound sense of peace. Maria and I had always talked about retiring to the coast someday. That someday had never come for her, but perhaps it could for me. I began researching coastal properties, initially just browsing listings for fun. Then I saw it, a beautiful cedar-shingled house on a bluff, overlooking the ocean in a small but upscale coastal town. The listing featured panoramic windows facing the water, a wraparound porch perfect for morning coffee, and private beach access. It was significantly more expensive than I had planned, but with my combined resources, it was within reach. After a whirlwind tour and negotiations, I made an offer. 2 weeks later, the house was mine. My friends helped me pack up the home where I had lived for 30 years, the house where I had raised Thomas and shared a life with Maria. Surprisingly, the process felt more liberating than sad, closing one chapter to begin another. Moving day arrived bright and clear in early summer. As the moving truck pulled away from my old house, I didn't look back. Frank followed me in his truck to the coastal property, whistling in appreciation as we pulled into the circular drive. "Now this," he said with a wide grin, "is what I call a fresh start." That first night in my new home, I sat on the porch with a glass of good scotch, watching the moon cast a silver path across the water. The sound of waves against the shore formed a peaceful soundtrack to my thoughts. For the first time in years, I felt truly at home and at peace. The next morning, I took photos of the sunrise from my deck and, on impulse, posted them to my rarely used social media account. "New home, new chapter," I wrote, feeling a quiet pride in how far I had come from those dark days of isolation and despair. I spent the day arranging furniture and unpacking essentials, pausing occasionally to simply stare at the ocean view that now belonged to me. Around sunset, I was organizing books on shelves when the doorbell rang. Assuming it was a neighbor coming to introduce themselves, I opened the door with a welcoming smile. The smile froze on my face. Standing on my porch were Thomas, Amanda, and my now teenage grandchildren, all looking uncomfortable but expectant. Behind them on the circular drive sat their car, packed full with suitcases and boxes. "Hello, Dad," Thomas said, his voice strained with false cheer. "Surprise." I stood in the doorway, momentarily unable to speak. Thomas had aged considerably, stress lines etched around his eyes. Amanda's practiced smile hadn't changed, though it didn't reach her eyes. Behind them stood two teenagers I barely recognized. Jackson, now 15, had grown tall and lanky, while Lily, 12, partially hid behind her mother, sneaking curious glances at me. "Thomas," I finally managed. "This is unexpected." Amanda stepped forward, her voice honeyed. "Your new home is absolutely gorgeous, Octavio. We saw your post online, and just had to come congratulate you in person." Her eyes darted past me, taking inventory of the interior visible through the open door. Shock gave way to caution as I processed the scene before me. 10 years of silence broken not by a phone call or letter, but by an unannounced visit with luggage in tow. Something wasn't adding up. "Please, come in," I said, stepping aside. Politeness ingrained over decades overcame my instinct to demand explanations first. They filed past me into the spacious living room with its panoramic ocean views. Amanda immediately gravitated toward the windows, making appreciative noises about the million-dollar view. Thomas awkwardly patted my shoulder, a gesture that felt foreign after so many years without contact. The grandchildren stood uncomfortably by the doorway, clearly having no idea how to interact with this stranger who was supposedly their grandfather. My heart ached, looking at them, thinking of all the birthdays and milestones I had missed. "Would anyone like something to drink?" I offered, falling back on basic hospitality while I gathered my thoughts. Over lemonade on the deck, superficial conversation flowed. They asked about the house, the neighborhood, how long I had lived here. I answered mechanically, watching Thomas and Amanda exchange meaningful glances. The teenagers remained mostly silent, occasionally whispering to each other. Finally, when a natural lull came in the conversation, I asked the obvious question. "So, what brings you all this way with so much luggage? Are you on vacation in the area?" Thomas cleared his throat, suddenly finding his glass fascinating. "Well, Dad, that's actually something we wanted to discuss with you." Amanda jumped in, her voice smooth and rehearsed. "We've been thinking for so long about how to reconnect our family. When we saw you had moved to this beautiful area, it seemed like the perfect opportunity for a fresh start for all of us." "A fresh start," I repeated, keeping my tone neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. "Yes," Thomas continued, gaining confidence. "We've been going through some changes recently. I was laid off from my position 3 months ago. The job market is tough right now." Amanda interjected, "And with the economy the way it is, housing prices in our area collapsed. We had to short sell our home." She sighed dramatically. "Such a shame after all the work we put into it." The pieces were beginning to come together. I looked pointedly at the car full of luggage. "And you thought, families should stick together during difficult times," Amanda stated, as if reciting a greeting card sentiment. "We thought we could stay here while we get back on our feet. The kids would love growing up near the ocean, and you'd finally have the chance to really know your grandchildren." Thomas nodded eagerly. "We could help around the house. Maybe I could even find construction work locally." He gestured around. "This place is certainly big enough for all of us." I sat very still, processing what was happening. The family that had shut me out for a decade, returned every gift, declined every invitation, and ignored my health crisis was now proposing to move into my home, not because they missed me or regretted their behavior, but because they needed something from me. "How long were you thinking of staying?" I asked carefully. They exchanged another glance. "Well," Thomas hedged, "until we get back on our feet financially. Housing around here is probably more affordable than where we were." "Actually," Amanda corrected, "oceanfront property in this area is quite exclusive. But we were thinking more long-term, really. A permanent arrangement that benefits everyone." The audacity nearly took my breath away. They had not only assumed I would take them in, but were already planning to stay permanently in a home I had bought as my personal sanctuary. "I see," I said quietly. "And what about the last 10 years?" The question hung in the air like a thundercloud. Thomas shifted uncomfortably, while Amanda's smile tightened. "We've all made mistakes," she said dismissively. "But we're family, and family forgives, right? Water under the bridge." I turned my attention to my grandchildren, who were watching this exchange with obvious discomfort. "Jackson, Lily, Would you mind exploring the beach for a few minutes while I talk with your parents? The path down is just over there. Once the teenagers were out of earshot, I turned back to Thomas and Amanda. Let me understand this correctly. You haven't spoken to me in 10 years. You returned my letters unopened. You kept my grandchildren from knowing me. Now you've lost your house and jobs, and suddenly I'm family again? Thomas at least had the grace to look ashamed. Dad, I know how it must seem. Do you? I asked quietly. Do you have any idea what these years have been like for me? Holidays alone, birthdays with no calls, driving by baseball games, just to catch a glimpse of grandchildren who don't even know who I am? Amanda's expression hardened. That's not fair. You were always trying to control Thomas, trying to run our lives. We needed to establish boundaries. Boundaries, I repeated incredulously. Is that what you call complete abandonment? And what about the $50,000 I loaned you for your house down payment? The house you just lost. Was refusing to pay back a single penny of that also about boundaries? Thomas flinched. We were going to pay that back. Things just got complicated. Things got convenient, I corrected. It was convenient to take my money, convenient to disappear, and now it's convenient to remember I exist because you need a free place to live. Amanda's facade finally cracked, showing the anger beneath. Well, look at all this. She gestured around at the luxurious home. You've clearly been doing fine without us. You can obviously afford to help your family when they're in need. Her words confirmed what I already knew. They hadn't come because they missed me or regretted their treatment of me. They came because they saw the house online and calculated its value to them. I stood up, suddenly needing space. I need a moment to think. Please excuse me. In my bedroom, I closed the door and took several deep breaths. Through the window, I could see Jackson and Lily walking along the shoreline, occasionally stopping to examine shells or rocks. These were my grandchildren, Maria's grandchildren, yet they were strangers to me. Part of me, the lonely part that had ached for family all these years, wanted to say yes, to welcome them with open arms despite everything. Perhaps this was my second chance at having a family. But another part, the part that had painfully rebuilt my self-respect and created a new life, recognized the toxic pattern. If I allowed them to move in without addressing the past decade of rejection, what would stop them from discarding me again once they got what they needed? My mind turned to Frank's words from years ago. You can't control how others treat you, but you can control how much power you give their treatment over your life. With sudden clarity, I knew what I needed to do. This wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about self-respect and breaking unhealthy patterns. If there was any hope for genuine reconciliation, it would have to be built on honesty and mutual respect, not convenience and exploitation. I returned to the deck, where Thomas and Amanda waited, expectant expressions on their faces. They clearly believed I would cave, that family obligation would override all the hurt they had caused. I've made my decision, I said, my voice calm and clear. Before I tell you my decision, I began, sitting down across from them, I want you to understand something. These past 10 years haven't been just a minor disagreement or a temporary distance. For me, they represented complete abandonment by my only family. Thomas started to speak, but I held up my hand. Please let me finish. I need you to hear this. I continued, my voice steady despite the emotion behind my words. After your mother died, you were all the family I had left. I gave you space to grieve and build your own life. I supported your marriage and celebrated my grandchildren's births. When you needed financial help, I gave it freely and without conditions. Amanda shifted uncomfortably as I addressed the financial issue directly. That $50,000 wasn't just money to me. It represented years of hard work and sacrifice, given to you out of love. The fact that you took it and then cut me out of your lives feels like more than ingratitude. It feels like betrayal. Thomas looked down, unable to meet my eyes. We didn't see it that way at the time, he mumbled. That's the problem, I replied. You didn't see me at all. Not as a father who loved you, not as a grandfather with rights to know his grandchildren. not even as a human being with feelings. I became irrelevant to you once I had served my purpose. I turned toward the ocean, gathering my thoughts before continuing. Do you know what I did the day your letter was returned unopened? I packed away every family photo, every memory, and decided to rebuild my life without you. Not because I stopped loving you, but because I finally accepted you had stopped loving me. The statement hung in the air between us. Amanda's practiced composure had completely dissolved, replaced by genuine discomfort. Thomas looked stricken, perhaps truly seeing the consequences of his actions for the first time. "Dad, we never stopped loving you," he protested weakly. "Love is an action, Thomas, not just a feeling. Your actions showed complete indifference to my existence. Do you know I had a heart scare 2 years ago? I sent you an email because I thought my son should know if something happened to me. Your response was 2 sentences long." Thomas paled. "I didn't know it was serious." "You never asked," I pointed out. "You were too busy to even call." Amanda attempted to regain control of the conversation. "We all made mistakes. Can't we just move forward without dwelling on the past?" I turned to her directly. "Moving forward requires understanding how we got here. Without that, we're just pretending, and I'm done pretending. I'm done being the convenient grandfather who only exists when you need something from him." Looking at both of them, I delivered my decision. "Here's what I'm prepared to offer. You can stay in my guest rooms for 2 weeks while you figure out your next steps. During that time, we will all attend family counseling together. If you're serious about rebuilding our relationship, it will take work from all sides." Their expressions showed surprise. They had clearly expected either immediate rejection or complete capitulation, not this measured response. "After 2 weeks," I continued, "I'll help you find affordable housing nearby and assist with the security deposit if the counseling is going well. Thomas, I have contacts in the local construction industry who might have job openings. But there will be no long-term living arrangement here without genuine reconciliation first." "That's your idea of helping family?" Amanda asked, an edge of bitterness in her voice. "No," I replied calmly. "That's my idea of respecting myself, while also offering you a chance to rebuild what you destroyed. You seem to have forgotten that relationships require trust, and trust requires consistency. You haven't earned back the right to be financially dependent on me." Thomas was silent for a long moment before finally nodding. "That's fair," he admitted quietly. "More than fair, considering everything." Amanda started to object, but Thomas cut her off. "No, Amanda, my father is right. We can't just show up after 10 years and expect to move in like nothing happened." The frankness of his admission surprised me. Perhaps there was hope for understanding after all. "If you're not comfortable with these terms, I'll pay for a hotel for 2 nights while you make other arrangements," I added. "The choice is yours." Amanda stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. We're family. Family doesn't make conditions. Family doesn't abandon each other either," I countered evenly. Yet, here we are. Thomas put a restraining hand on Amanda's arm. "We'll accept your offer, Dad. The 2 weeks and the counseling. We owe you that much at least." I could see Amanda calculating behind her eyes, likely figuring that 2 weeks of free housing was better than nothing, and she could work on changing my mind during that time. But something in Thomas's expression seemed genuinely reflective. "I need to call the kids back," Thomas said, "and explain the situation to them." As Thomas walked down to the beach, Amanda remained standing, her posture rigid with displeasure. "You've changed," she accused. "Yes," I agreed simply. "I have." The next morning, we had our first awkward family breakfast. The teenagers were confused by the sudden appearance of a grandfather they barely remembered, and the tension between their parents. I tried to make them comfortable, showing Jackson my workshop in the basement and pointing out the best fishing spots to Lily. 3 days into their stay, we had our first counseling session with Dr. Reynolds, a family therapist I had found through my doctor. The session was difficult, with raw emotions and defensive reactions on all sides. Thomas revealed he had felt controlled by my financial help, while Amanda admitted she had actively discouraged contact because she felt I judged her parenting. I expressed my hurt and abandonment, speaking plainly about the depression their rejection had caused. Dr. Reynolds guided us skillfully, helping us identify toxic patterns without assigning blame. At the end of the session, she gave us homework to complete before our next meeting. Each of us had to write a letter, explaining our perspective on the estrangement, focusing on feelings rather than accusations. That evening, I found Thomas alone on the deck, staring at the ocean. For several minutes, we sat in silence before he spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," he began hesitantly. "About love being an action, not just a feeling. It made me realize something." I waited, giving him space to gather his thoughts. "I think I've been a coward," he continued. "It was easier to go along with Amanda's feelings about you than to stand up for our relationship. Easier to avoid the conflict at home by cutting you off completely." The admission seemed to cost him considerable effort. I told myself it was about boundaries, but truthfully, I was just taking the path of least resistance. I justified it by focusing on minor disagreements we'd had, blowing them out of proportion until they seemed to justify the distance. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. He sighed heavily. "Because seeing you again, hearing how you've built a life without us, made me realize what I threw away. And for what? To avoid uncomfortable conversations with my wife? To avoid feeling guilty about the money? I've been a terrible son." For the first time in our adult relationship, I saw genuine self-awareness in Thomas's eyes. It didn't erase the years of pain, but it opened a door I had thought permanently closed. The following 2 weeks brought gradual, tentative steps toward reconciliation. More counseling sessions revealed layers of misunderstanding and resentment on all sides. Thomas began to see how Amanda had manipulated his perceptions of me, while Amanda confronted her own insecurities that had driven her need for complete control over their family unit. Most precious to me were the small connections forming with my grandchildren. Jackson showed interest in my carpentry skills, while Lily and I discovered a shared love of beach, combing for interesting shells and stones. These weren't deep bonds yet, but they were beginnings. At the end of the 2-week period, true to my word, I helped them find a small but comfortable apartment in town and paid the security deposit. Thomas secured an interview with a construction company owned by my former colleague and seemed genuinely motivated to rebuild his career from the ground up. Amanda remained the most resistant to change, but even she had moments of genuine reflection during our counseling sessions. Her controlling nature hadn't disappeared, but she was beginning to recognize it as a problem rather than a strength. Our new arrangement was far from perfect. We had difficult days when old patterns threatened to reemerge. There were arguments and misunderstandings that required patient resolution, but underlying it all was a commitment to honesty that hadn't existed before. 3 months after their unexpected arrival on my doorstep, we celebrated Thanksgiving together in my home. As I looked around the table at the family I had thought lost forever, I felt grateful not just for their presence, but for the strength I had found in their absence. Had I not rebuilt myself during those years alone, I might have welcomed them back on any terms, perpetuating unhealthy dynamics rather than establishing new ones based on mutual respect. As Thomas raised his glass in a toast to new beginnings, I realized something important. Sometimes standing firm in your own worth is the greatest gift you can give, not just to yourself, but to those who have forgotten the meaning of genuine love and respect. The path toward genuine healing proved neither quick nor straight. Over the following months, we continued our family counseling sessions, gradually decreasing the frequency as healthier patterns of interaction became established. Each session uncovered another layer of misunderstandings and hurt feelings that needed addressing. For Thomas, the process brought painful revelations about how he had allowed himself to be manipulated, both by Amanda's controlling nature and his own avoidance of conflict. During one particularly emotional session, he confessed that he had often thought about reaching out to me over the years but had convinced himself it was too late to repair the damage. "I would drive by your old house sometimes," he admitted, "just to see if your car was there, to know you were okay, but I never had the courage to knock on the door." This confession stunned me. All those years I had thought myself completely forgotten, while my son had been wrestling with his own regrets, trapped in a cycle of avoidance and shame. Amanda's journey proved more challenging. Her need for control stemmed from deep insecurities about her own worth, making it difficult for her to acknowledge when she was wrong. The breakthrough came during our 6th month of counseling, when Dr. Reynolds guided her through exploring her relationship with her own parents. "I never felt good enough for them," Amanda revealed, tears streaming down her face. "Nothing I did earned their approval." When I met Thomas's father, his obvious love and pride in Thomas threatened me. I couldn't stand the comparison between his parenting and what I had experienced. For the first time, I saw beyond Amanda's perfect facade to the wounded person beneath. Understanding her motivations didn't excuse her actions, but it helped me develop compassion for her struggles. Gradually, she began making genuine efforts to change, attending individual therapy alongside our family sessions. My relationship with my grandchildren blossomed slowly but steadily. Jackson, now 16, started spending Saturdays in my workshop, learning the fundamentals of carpentry just as his father had decades before. His natural aptitude reminded me so much of Thomas at that age that sometimes my throat tightened with emotion watching him work. Lily proved more cautious, having been raised with stories about a controlling grandfather she barely remembered. Our connection began through shared interests, rather than forced familiarity. I discovered she loved photography, so I bought her a professional quality camera for her 13th birthday. Together, we would walk the beach at sunrise, capturing the ever-changing light on the water. During these quiet mornings, she gradually opened up about her life, her dreams, her fears. By Christmas, 7 months after their unexpected arrival, we had established new traditions that honored our past while acknowledging our changed circumstances. Thomas and his family remained in their own apartment, maintaining healthy boundaries while still being regular presences in my life. We shared Sunday dinners at my house, with everyone contributing to the meal preparation. The financial aspects of our relationship required particular care. Thomas insisted on creating a repayment plan for the original $50,000 loan, though I would have forgiven the debt. "It's not about the money," he explained. "It's about taking responsibility for my commitments." His monthly payments were small but consistent, symbolizing his commitment to our rebuilding trust. My relationship with my community remained vital to my well-being. I maintained my friendships and volunteer work, introducing Thomas and the grandchildren to the extended family I had created during my years alone. Frank became a particular favorite with Jackson, his straightforward manner and wealth of stories providing another positive male influence in the boy's life. The teens I mentored in the construction program continued to hold a special place in my heart. Darren, now in his 2nd year of apprenticeship, occasionally joined us for Sunday dinner, bringing a reminder that family connections can form in unexpected places. Watching him interact with Jackson, sharing their experiences learning the trade, filled me with quiet joy. As the 2nd year of our reconciliation began, we faced another challenge when Thomas received a job offer in a city 2 hours away. In our old pattern, this might have created another estrangement, but now we approached it differently. Together, we discussed options and compromises, ultimately agreeing that weekend visits and regular video calls would maintain our connection. The greatest test came when Amanda's father fell ill, requiring extended family care. She approached me with remarkable humility, asking if I would help support the grandchildren during this difficult time. The trust implicit in this request represented how far we had come. For 3 weeks, Jackson and Lily stayed with me while their parents handled the medical crisis, our relationship deepening through this shared challenge. Throughout this journey of reconciliation, I continued nurturing my own independent life. My coastal home remained my sanctuary, a place where I could reflect on how far I had come from those dark days of isolation. I began writing a memoir about my experiences, not for publication but as a way to process the complex emotions of abandonment and reunion. One evening, as I sat on my deck watching the sunset with Thomas, he asked a question that caught me by surprise. "Do you think Mom would be proud of us?" of how we found our way back to each other. The question stirred deep emotions. "Your mother always believed in second chances," I replied after a thoughtful pause. "She would have been heartbroken by the years we lost. But yes, I think she would be proud of the work we've done to heal." Thomas nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I wish she could see her grandchildren." "She sees them through us," I said simply, "through the stories we tell and the love we share." As the third anniversary of our reconciliation approached, I reflected on the profound lessons this journey had taught me. I had learned that true forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing past wrongs, but rather choosing not to let those wrongs determine your future. I had discovered that standing firm in your self-respect can be an act of love rather than rejection. Most importantly, I had come to understand that family isn't an obligation to be endured, but a relationship to be nurtured through honest communication and mutual respect. The journey hadn't been perfect. We still had disagreements and misunderstandings. Old patterns occasionally resurfaced during times of stress. But beneath these challenges ran a current of genuine commitment to maintaining our connection, a shared determination never to return to those years of silence and separation. My greatest joy came not from grand gestures of reconciliation, but from small moments of ordinary connection. Helping Lily with a school project. Discussing career options with Jackson as he approached graduation. Sharing a quiet beer with Thomas on the deck, comfortable enough in each other's presence that silence felt natural rather than strained. I also found unexpected peace in accepting that some wounds never completely heal. The decade of estrangement had changed me permanently. I would always carry a certain wariness, a protective instinct born from profound hurt. But I had learned this wariness could coexist with love and forgiveness, serving as wisdom rather than a barrier. Looking back, I realized the greatest gift I had given myself was refusing to accept a relationship based on convenience and exploitation. By requiring honesty and accountability, I had created the possibility for genuine healing rather than a superficial pretense of family harmony. If I could share one piece of wisdom from my journey, it would be this: true family bonds are built on respect, not obligation. Blood ties give us a starting point, but meaningful connection requires consistent action, honest communication, and mutual care. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and others is to stand firmly in our truth, creating the opportunity for authentic relationship rather than comfortable illusion. So I ask you, my friends watching this, what boundaries do you need to establish in your own family relationships? Have you found yourself sacrificing your self-respect in the name of keeping peace? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, it's never too late to heal family wounds, but genuine healing requires courage and truth from all sides. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find both strength and compassion in your own family journey.